Hey there, everybody. It's the week of Thanksgiving as I record this, and we're finally getting a shot of cold weather, at least here in North Carolina. You might be thinking, well, that's another season in the books. Time to pack the gear away and see you in the spring. But there are a number of things happening this time of the year. Places that are unbearably hot during the summer months are becoming perfect camp spots. And, say it with me, the bugs are all dying. You might just be missing out on one of the best times of year to get out and go on a trip. But how do you keep from turning into Jack Nicholson at the end of The Shining out there in winter? Well, I'm going to be talking about just that on today's episode, so stick around. Hello and welcome. My wife Susan and I, we're on a mission to explore the byways of this country to find the food, the people, and even the odd stuff. We're exploring where the roads lead after you leave the interstates behind, and beyond where the roads end. Whether you're thinking about getting started overlanding or rocking a fully built rig, I'll be talking about the places we go and giving tips to make your journeys go smoother. And it all starts now on this episode of The Dirt Road Tourist. Welcome back, and thanks for joining me today. My name's Ken, and I'm your host for the Dirt Road Tourist. If you're joining me for the first time, be sure to hit like and follow or subscribe, depending on the platform you're listening through. If you're not listening for the first time, well, what are you waiting for? Your engagement helps other people find the podcast, so get your mouse or pointer finger going. It's just one button. You can do it. So today I want to talk about camping in cold weather because it seems just like the right episode to have that conversation. Susan and I started building out our cold camping kit a few years ago because we wanted to be able to overland travel year round. And while there is some extra gear that comes along with camping in cold weather, it's not a crazy amount of money, especially when it's stacked against what you've probably already spent on outfitting your vehicle. The biggest thing you have to consider when trying to get out camping in cold weather is hypothermia. Hypothermia is possible in outside temperatures as high as 50 degrees. At such temperatures, it is usually due to clothing having become wet. Hypothermia becomes more likely at temperatures below 40 degrees. Warning signs of hypothermia include uncontrollable shivering, memory loss, disorientation, slurred speech, and drowsiness. If you or any of your camping companions are experiencing these symptoms, you either need to cut them off from the whiskey or you need to get them immediately to a warm place like the vehicle cabin with a heat light on or get them medical attention. Temperatures below 40 require extra attention to the clothing and bedding you take with you on a trip. And on days where a great deal of variability is expected, your layers are your friend. And there are two primary ways of dealing with winter temperatures when camping. You can either take warm clothes and bedding or take a heater of some sort. With warm clothing and bedding, this is the way that winter camping was done in old school days. Back then, a heavy coat, a thick wool blanket, and some skill with a campfire were how people survived braving the wilds in the winter weather. Technology has come a long way since those days. Today, we have 4-channel hollow fiber fill, lightweight waterproof synthetic fabrics, Gore-Tex, Kevlar. Modern gear can keep you not only alive, but comfortable when the mercury is hovering around the bottom of the tube. You want to avoid cotton clothing in cold weather. The moisture wicking and evaporative properties of cotton that make it such a comfortable choice in summer can be deadly in cold weather. Synthetic materials are going to be warmer and more waterproof, which is particularly necessary in wet winter weather. Layers trap air in between them and provide added warmth. But it also permits you to adjust for varying conditions, like when you sit down around a campfire, you can just peel off a layer. If you're camping in the winter without a heater, you're going to want a really good sleeping bag. This is one item where you definitely don't want to pinch pennies if you're getting out in the cold. Look for a comfort rating for camp sleeping gear rather than a survival rating. Most gear manufacturers like to advertise the survival rating because it's the lower of the two numbers. Survival rating only means that you won't die at the rated temperature, but you certainly won't be comfortable. Adding layers to your bedding can be a cheaper way to bulk up underrated sleeping bags. Camp blankets, like the one made by King Camp, can be slid down into a bag that's having to punch over its weight. These puffer blankets are lightweight, warm, and they pack down into a small stuff sack. You can also wrap them around you in camp for extra warmth when you're outside the tent. If you're going the heater route, you have several options. And speaking of skill with fires, that brings me to hot tents. These are usually teepee style tents with a heat resistant panel stitched into the roof. These are made for use with these flat fold wood stoves, and the flue pipe goes up through the heat-proof panel. Keep feeding split wood into the stove, and you've got a warm, dry place to escape the elements and get a cozy night's sleep. This is the OG way to keep a tent warm. By putting out dry heat, it also keeps condensation from forming on the inside of the tent overnight. One of the major advantages to these is that the wood stoves run on one of the most available fuels out there, wood. Unless you're camping in a place that doesn't let you forage for firewood, or if you're camping above the tree line. If you have to pack it in with you, then campwood is the bulkiest and heaviest of the heater fuels. You also have to shovel out the wood ash from them in the morning, so it can add some time to your breakdown. It also relegates you to using a ground tent. We prefer a rooftop tent. There aren't any of those designed for use with a wood stove, and it'd scare the heck out of me if there were. So, heaters for rooftop tents. These come in two basic flavors, buddy heaters and diesel heaters. Buddy heaters aren't my favorite, so hey, let's talk about those first. These things can be purchased online, Walmart, Costco, Home Depot, and just about any sporting goods store that's worth its salt. They run in the $50 range and they use 1 pound cans of propane for fuel, which can also be purchased just about anywhere. They're compact, lightweight, and fairly simple. You light them and let them keep your tent toasty all night, which they do. So, what's not to like about them? Well, let's get into some of the cons on these things. First off, you have to have a place to set them. They're designed to be placed on the floor in a corner of the ground tent. If you've been in a rooftop tent, you know there is no floor. The whole floor of the tent is your bed. They do have a handle on the top, and some folks use hooks to hang them from the frame, but you're still left with a device that is actively combusting fuel on the inside of your tent while you sleep. The other thing is that a byproduct of burning propane is water vapor, which is going into the air inside your tent and it's going to hit those cold sidewalls and roof and it's going to condense and drip onto your face at 3 o'clock in the morning every time. Well, maybe it's just me. Still, these are a solid option if you're camping on a budget. They will get the job done and they will open up all 4 seasons of overlanding and camping trips. Then there is the diesel heater, which is what we use. We purchased our diesel heater 2 years ago. It is one of the Viver brand units we got off of Amazon, an 8 kilowatt unit. They make them in 5 kilowatt size, and I've even seen them in a 2 kilowatt since. I recommend the lighter capacity one, but I figured, hey, eight's better than one, right? If you're heating a 3-car garage, yes. If you're heating a rooftop tent, well, let me tell you what we learned. We took ours out for a test run in a nearby state park on a night with temperatures forecast in the mid 20s. I'd never used one of these things. The instructions that come with them are both light on the details and not, I suspect, originally written for an English speaking audience. But out we went on a cold night to put this thing through its paces. Ours had heat settings that run from 1 to 6, and I ran the vent hose into the side window of the tent. I didn't have the first clue what setting to put it on, so I just split the difference and set it to 3. Soon we had nice, dry, warm air going into the tent, and off to bed we went, nice and toasty warm. We both woke up at 1 a.m. in what could best be described as a sweat lodge. I didn't have a thermometer handy, but I'm dead certain it was north of 80 in that tent. I didn't think it was even possible to get one body of air to be more than 50 degrees warmer than another that's separated only by a piece of fabric, but there we were in our own Bikram yoga hell. I'm thinking, gee, I know what a tray of beef jerky feels like when I put it in the dehydrator now. Susan was about ready to kill me and was telling me to hurry up and turn the heater down. Our unit came with this little keychain remote, but the heater was set up on the driver's side of the truck, and the remote is infrared. We had a hard shell tent at the time, so the remote didn't work through the back wall. I tried unzipping the window on my side of the tent and sticking my arm out to get a better angle with the remote, but without luck. By the way, they sell these heaters with Bluetooth now. You download an app and you can control the heater from your cell phone. If you're in the market for one of these things, I'll save you the comparison shopping. Just get that one. That night, I was sleeping in skivvies and a t-shirt. I really didn't want to suit up and lace on boots just to walk around the back of the vehicle and punch a button 2 times. But I had exhausted my other options and I needed to do something before this thing turned us both into raisins. So down the ladder I went in my boxers out into this 23-degree night and finally got the heater set to 1 and then climbed back up. That tent felt fantastic. Susan was still griping that it wasn't cooling off fast enough, and I was like, try stripping down to your underwear and go out there for a few minutes. You'll come back with a different perspective on the temperature in here. We now have a soft shell tent with openings on all four sides, so I can always get an angle with the keychain remote. But I also know now just to set the thing to 1 and don't mess with it. 1 is good. I don't know what the temperature outside needs to be to set that thing to 6, but I know it doesn't happen in North Carolina. So, what is a diesel heater anyway? Well, it's basically a combustion chamber that burns diesel fuel and has a heat exchanger. A fan pulls in outside air, passes it through the heat exchanger, and up through a dryer vent hose up into the tent. The combustion happens outside the tent, and the exhaust is directed away from the rig. The air that gets pumped into your tent is bone dry, so you wake up to a warm, dry tent, which is, I gotta tell you, it's really nice. So, what are the downsides? Well, there are a couple, but this is still the best option to us. The first is the diesel fuel. It's available at most gas stations you pass on your trips, but you have to have a leak proof way to store the stuff in your rig. We drive a truck and we keep the fuel in the bed, so we're not really forced to savor the aroma of diesel fuel while we drive. But if you're in an SUV, you'll probably want to look into some of the externally mounted fuel can options, things like Rotapacks. They have mounts that you can put on the outside of the vehicle and mount the Rotapacks there. The other thing is there's the electricity. Diesel heaters have a fan to move the heated air up into your tent and a glow plug to get things going from a cold start. So you've got to have a source of electricity to power them. Once they get going, they only need about 1 amp to keep the fan running, but they draw upwards of 30 amps to run the glow plug on startup. That's more than most of the smaller portable power stations, like the one we have, can deliver, so they usually have to be clipped directly to a car battery. If your starter battery is fairly new, it can run one of these things all night without any problems. But an older starter battery could get drawn down to where it might not turn over the engine in the morning, and that would be bad, particularly if you're camping in a place that AAA doesn't get to. We already had a secondary house battery installed in the truck by the time we got our heater, and so we just use that. It gets topped off while we drive the next day, and we're always good to go when we set up for our next night's camp. So that's the rundown of the camp heater options. There are some other items, kind of a miscellaneous category that I want to talk about because they can make your winter adventures a lot more comfortable. The first one is hand warmers. These come in two types, chemical, and now they have electric ones too. The chemical ones are readily available, cheap, and effective. Brands like Hot Hands are sold in boxes. They're lightweight, thin, easy to use. You snap a capsule in the pouch, shake the thing to activate it, and it gets warm and stays that way for hours. You can slip them into your coat pockets, and, well, they keep your hands warm. But if your jacket has an inside breast pocket, you can slip these in there and they'll keep you toasty. I've even used these back in the day to get through cold nights in a Kmart sleeping bag by activating a couple of them and tossing them down into it. There are also electric hand warmers now. Okupa is one of the popular brands of them. They come in pairs. I mean, you have two hands, right? They stick together with magnets and they're rechargeable. They come in a range of battery capacities from 7,000 milliamp hours up to about 14,000 milliamp hours are the ones you see most commonly. You want to spring for the larger ones because you want something that's going to last a long time and not leave you sitting in the cold waiting for the things to recharge. Or you can also pick up a box of the chemical ones to get you through while your electric ones are topping off. As a bonus, I've seen some of these with an outlet port so that you can use them to top off your phone with them on days whenever you come up a little short. Speaking of hands, a good pair of gloves is a must in the wintertime. Folding down your tent on a cold morning is misery with bare hands. I've got a pair that have conductive patches in the fingertips so I can check my phone without taking them off. They're not really good when the stuff outside is wet though. You're going to want to be able to build a good campfire. So go back and listen to my episode on fire building for tips on making a good campfire. Unless you want to spend the whole evening in camp inside your tent, you need to have a good roaring campfire to pull up chairs around, load up more firewood than you usually take, and maybe a flask of Glenlivet doesn't hurt either. Just saying. Speaking of beverages, a hot cup of coffee in the morning goes a long way towards making that exit from your warm tent bearable. I've got a whole episode planned for making a great cup of joe in the wild, so stay tuned. If you're making your coffee into one of those speckled enamel steel mug things, it's going to be cold by the time you get to your second sip. We've got a couple of mugs made by Yeti. And while I'm not a fanboy of their $400 coolers, I do love their coffee mugs. These things will keep your coffee hot for hours. If it's any help, I also recommend packing a warm set of thermal pajamas for if you have to exit the tent in the night. That's all I've got to say about that. That's a rundown of the stuff we pack to make camping in the winter elements more comfortable. If there's anything I left out, drop me a line at ken@dirtroadtourist.com. That's ken@dirtroadtourist, all one word, .com. So here we are, 10 episodes in the books. 44% of podcasts don't even make it to 3 episodes, so I'm definitely ahead of that curve. You may have noticed some changes on this episode. I'm still refining what this podcast is about and what I want it to sound like, and I'm still kind of tweaking it around the edges. This episode is more like a complete overhaul, but hey, I'm trying to put out the best product I can for you, and I'm still learning this podcast stuff as I go. I always hear other pods I listen to talking about where they can be found, which kind of seems odd to me. If you're listening to them tell you that, it seems like they've already found you. But just in case, we're hosted on Spotify, and you'll find the podcast there. We're also on iHeartRadio, YouTube, and Apple Podcasts, so wherever you prefer to get your podcast from, chances are we're there. Even if you don't listen to Dirt Road Tourist on Apple, you can go over to their website and leave a 5-star review. It would really help get the podcast out to other listeners, and you have my thanks in advance. We are also found on Instagram and on Facebook. There is a Dirt Road Tourist group on Facebook, so head on over and join in the conversation there. We'd love to have you become a member. Be sure to join me here again next week for episode 11. See, if you hit that follow button like I told you at the top of the show, you wouldn't have to worry about that now. Go ahead and just hit it now. Just do it already. I'll be back with more overlanding content next Monday. Until then, have a great week and go see something amazing.